So, my last video ruffled some feathers. I didn't mean for that to happen. The thumbnail was just supposed to be a JJK reference, but in hindsight, statements like, "Yes, her mold sucks ass, but that's exactly what you want." What did I really expect? Anyways, to rectify this discretion, let's cover an even more contentious topic. Saryn versus Mirage. Who deals the more damage? Who's faster? Who is more of a team player? Who's the more versatile? And ultimately, who is the better Warframe? I am sure that at the end of this, we'll all see eye to eye, and we'll all be friends. So anyways. So, I have to give this to Saryn because Mirage doesn't have a movement ability outside of just having relatively high base parkour velocity. However, Molt is barely a movement ability anyways. It helps you to get out of the way of your recently created focus fire dummy. Even with 300% ability strength, this barely moves the needle. Most of the time, it's still better to bullet jump. If you already have 300% ability strength and you don't mind sacking your utility melee for the opportunity to whip spam through the map, fine, I guess. But to claim that Saryn is faster than the likes of Titania is criminal and wrong. Saryn is not a speed frame. I'll generously give Saryn 2 points. And Mirage a fat goose egg. Let's start with Mirage, since she is way simpler to talk about. Her Eclipse is a final damage multiplier that is multipliable with everything. This means that whatever damage you would deal without Eclipse is multiplied by this number plus 1 because the base damage is not included in this number. At 300%, ability strength Eclipse increases Mirage's damage 6 times. Then we have her Hall of Mirrors, which creates 4 clones of Mirage, which copies her attacks with 20% efficiency. This of course means that the clones deal 80% of Mirage's damage at 100% ability strength. At 300% ability strength, the clones deal 240% of Mirage's damage. Kind of. The clones don't actually aim at the same thing as the original, they just shoot in that same direction. This means that against precision high priority targets, Hall of Mirrors does nothing. I should also mention Hall of Malevolence, which isn't that good. Since it's capped at 10 stacks, which is only 50% multiplicative damage, meaning the most they can do is 360% damage. Except the clones can benefit from Eclipse with total Eclipse. So now we have to multiply the 350% by the 600%, which is a total of 2100%. Though let it be known that the clones are finicky and just straight up doesn't work with a lot of weapons. They also do not work with weapon arcanes or the most powerful mods in the entire game. When you look at the actual damage output of the clones, it is closer to 20%, not 350%. In conclusion, Mirage has about 600% increased damage against single targets and about 720% increased damage when aiming at the enemy's feet with a limited selection of weapons. For Saryn, let's start with Venom Dose. Since it's not ridiculously complicated, it adds 100% corrosive damage to your team's weapons in a 15-meter radius. At 300% ability strength, that's a 300% elemental buff. And not any element either. It's corrosive. In case you forgot, both corrosive and viral are made of toxic. So, with Venom Dose, you can have both. Also, this allows you to drop the elemental damage mods on your weapon, opening 2 entire mod slots. How much DPS that is exactly is hard to say. Going with a 50% damage increase is probably lowballing it, but I'd rather err on the side of caution. Now, for Toxic Lash. On the face of it, this is a 30% damage increase. However, underneath this simple exterior is a web of unintuitive damage scaling. Let's just start from the top. Each successful hit deals a guaranteed toxic proc, with the weapon status chance determining how likely it is to deal another toxic proc. I should mention that additional toxic procs happen independently from the inherited status elements on the weapon, so you get another toxic proc in addition to your viral proc, for example. Another quirk of Toxic Lash is that it triple dips with faction damage mods, so the initial hit is multiplied by 100% 155%, and then the toxin attack scales of the 155% initial attack, but it is also multiplied by the 155%, and then the toxin proc is also multiplied by 155%. This is why the toxin proc here deals way more than half of the initial hit. That's not all. Toxic Lash also double dips with toxic damage mods. The toxic damage increases the overall damage of the initial attack, which Toxic Lash scales of, but it uses the toxic damage a second time when calculating its own damage. And this also scales with the faction damage gimmick, which is how we get these instances, where the initial attack deals a tiny 17,000, while the toxic procs deal a total of 500,000. If you're counting, that's a 3,000% damage increase. In conclusion, Saryn deals slightly more damage than Mirage, and this effect is doubled on melee weapons, and this is without taking Venom Dose into account. Saryn is less restricted in terms of what weapons she can use, as bullet hoses and most projectile weapons are off limits for Mirage, with her clones aiming straight ahead and just being broken. I am giving Saryn 3 points over Mirage 10-7. There is a lot less to say, simply because, to put it bluntly, ability-based builds tend to have a lot less moving parts compared to weapon platform builds. In 90% of the early game, Saryn dominates. Yes, Mirage obliterates everything she comes into contact with, but she still has to come into contact with them, and that means she has to deal with line of sight requirements, while Saryn has to press 4 on her keyboard once in a while. There is one scenario where Mirage has Saryn beat, and that's in exterminate missions. Problem is, Saryn dominates the missions she is good at. While yes, Mirage has Saryn beat in exterminate, but several other Warframes have them both beat in that regard. When we get into the steel path, things shifts into Mirage's favor. Her disco ball is incredibly lethal. Meanwhile, the spore miasma combo straight up stops working. By the time the spores has built up enough damage to do something, they tend to collapse. At this point, you have to lean into the weapon platform aspect of Saryn. Luckily, you can do both effectively at the same time. The spores still fully strip the enemy's armor, with 2 Archon shards, that is. And miasma is still a massive stun and viral carpet. Meanwhile, Mirage is either or. Her ability build and her weapon build does not synergize, and they want completely different stats as well. It also bears mention that Mirage is pretty energy hungry compared to Saryn, specifically when talking about her ability focused build. Even bearing that in mind, I think Mirage performs slightly better in this category, so I'll give her 1 point over Saryn, 8 to 9 points. Okay, let's just be honest. Both contenders are great support targets, but they don't deal out a lot of it themselves. The support which they do have is basically the same. A damage buff with a 15-meter radius, eclipses in every conceivable way better than Venom Dose, and while you could make the argument that Saryn wants to build range on certain builds, while Mirage really doesn't, I would have to do some serious mental gymnastics to not give this round to Mirage, with 3 points over Saryn, 5-2. Mirage comes in with her illusions, which suck. The illusions can draw some fire away from you, but let me ask you this. When your shields go down, do you not immediately replenish them? Of course you do, as you damn well should. Mirage is made of glass. Quite fittingly that the light-based Warframe would be made of glass. But anyways, if you come under focus fire while your shield gate is down, you die, that's it, no ifs or buts. As Banshee will contest to, it's better to have something than to have nothing. But going up to a platoon of Grineer soldiers and going, "You can't hit," I'm giving Mirage a reluctant 1 point for survivability. Saryn, on the other hand. Look guys, Saryn's worst ability is Molt. You did not convince me otherwise. But to say it sucks ass was me being hyperbolic and a little extra YouTube. Compared to the rest of her kit, it's bad. But compared to all abilities in Warframe, it's damn good. Speaking of the speed boost for a second, it's not impactful in terms of her survivability. It's just not. Rolling reduces incoming damage by 75% and causes the enemies to be less accurate for a short time afterwards, which is way more impactful than a small boost of sprint speed. The decoy, on the other hand, while it's not Octavia's roly-poly, I mean, just look at the screen. Ultimately, this gives a reprieve from the bullet hell, and this does not. I am giving Saryn 3 points over Mirage 1 to 4. This is arguably the most important aspect of any Warframe. How often can you use them versus how much of a bench warmer they are? Banshee. Saryn and Mirage occupies the same space, dealing tons of damage both with their abilities and their weapons. However, they lag in CC or general utility. In mission types like defense or excavation, where the objective moves beyond setting world records for mass genocide, they both suffer a bit. On the one hand, Saryn has a greater span of weapons she can maximize. On the other hand, Mirage does better against bosses that has resistance to status stacking. I think Saryn is slightly more applicable in most situations except the circuit where Mirage dominates, but that's such a small part of the game. I give it to Saryn for the simple reason that if you do not like shield gating builds like I and many others do not, good luck trying to play Mirage. Umbra Saryn, on the other hand, is a thing, as you have been observing in the background of the video. I am giving Saryn 1 point over Mirage 8 to 7 points. And keep in mind, I don't think any Warframe is a 10 out of 10 in this category. Let's count the points. Saryn got 2 points for speed, 10 points for her weapon damage, 8 points for her ability build, 2 points for team utility, 4 points for her survivability, and 8 points for her versatility, leaving her with 35 out of 50 available points. Mirage got 7 for her weapon damage, 9 points for her ability build, 5 points for team utility, 1 point for survivability, and 7 points for her versatility, leaving her with 28 out of 50 possible available points. As you can see, Mirage performs quite well, managing to keep up with Saryn in a few categories which I didn't expect when I started making this video. I've gotten a much deeper understanding of Mirage's strengths and weaknesses. It pretty much just comes down to preference, since they are both really good and perform well in the same mission types. In this scenario where I have to pick a winner, I'll have to go with Saryn.